It's a great day here at KEKFILA's YouTube channel. I am your usual host, KEKFILA, and today I am bringing you my undefeated, undisputably never lost in a local yet in OP03 deck list of Doflamingo Don Quixote, the GOAT. And essentially, I played in one local. I usually do good at locals. I was debating between playing Big Mom or playing Crocodile or Doflamingo. I'm going to be playing in a tournament in less than 2 weeks, and I've been playing only Doflamingo in tournaments. I think I'm still comfortable playing Doflamingo even in the next set. It hasn't gotten worse, and I'll go through my matchups after I go over the deck list. I will already have the deck list before everything, so all you people that need a deck list, there you go. Here it is. Have fun with that. And I will go through all the cards just because this is probably what I'm most likely going to be running in OP03 and throughout with my very limited testing in OP03, what have you. But before I do that, I first wanted to show you guys some Dawn I have. Obviously, you see it's all very shiny. This is all the Dawn I usually play with. But I also have some Loser Dawn. If you're interested in getting that, go down in the description. You'll see some Loser Dawn that's for sale right now. And also shout out to Davidson and a couple other places. I'll have that Dawn link below as well because these Dawns are pretty neat. But without further ado, let's get into the goo. Doflamingo Don Quixote, the leader. I always have 100 Billy because I need to make this deck even more rare. I'm not even going to go over his skill, but essentially the main thing I was thinking between this and Croc, and this is still good, this is still building board, when faced with being defensive or aggressive, I think it's okay to go for aggression, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I really don't think it needs any more explaining to do. So let me go through everything. First of all, I have 3 Mihawks. Playing 4, maybe there's not enough room. I still think this card's super good and super balanced and really good on curve, especially when you're playing against these Katakuris and they're playing their Big Mom 7 costs. This is also good after that because they'll usually play that, and then on your turn you'll play this. There'll probably be some meta-defining stuff where they'll start going first instead of second, and I find this being good. So 3 Mihawks. Next, I do have the top deck checkers. I only run these. I run 4 Doflamingos and 4 Peronas. I am running 1 Judge one just because I thought it looked cool. And essentially, there is some going first and going second strategies here. If you watch any of my videos, I'll kind of go over when I do go first or second, what I'm mulliganing for. But generally, if you're going first, it's good to mulligan for this. It depends on the rest of your hand, if you can deal with that and what you're playing against. And then this is really good going second, because essentially if you see this, and let's say, it depends on your opponent. Let's say you also see a Jimbei, for example, and you're going second. You can place a Jimbei on 4 Dawn, and on 6 Dawn, you can place one of these, and then also use Doflamingo skill. Pretty solid choice here. So that's why I'm going with that. We're going to leave it there for the searchers. Next, what I have are all my events. And I'm running actually 1 high tech of Gum Gum Rain. Someone told me that it's really good on your Mihawk turn, and you know what? I believe that. It was pretty good on my Mihawk turn. I'm only running 1 of these. I actually don't have room in this deck, but I just felt instead of the 1-cost blocker law, which I'm not running any of those, I thought that this felt pretty in the balanced range of that, and it literally discards like a card that you really need to get rid of right now, because this did adding the 3,000 worlds to get rid of counter. So 1 Gum Gum Rain, I saw it every game. It was actually really useful and really surprising to your opponent, so definitely might even recommend, like, at worst 2. I am running 3,000 worlds, so I'm running 9,000 worlds here, and basically, the card's really good. Came out of trigger. Makes your opponent really think about things. It reminds me of set 1 Doflamingo, where you would play a Perona on turn 1. You usually would plan out your turn to be like a draw a card, place a card from the skill, draw 2 cards, and then place another card from the Doflamingo skill. And essentially, this is pretty good on your 5 Dawn turn, when this happens, because you're going to be able to have that tempo, especially getting rid of their really, really pesky cards like Robin, the yellow Sanji, things of this nature that you do want to get rid of. Cracker. That's also like a good option. So 3 of these, 4 might be too many in this deck, especially because this deck has so many top decking potentials with this. That's how I feel about that right now. And then last but not least of the events, I run 4 Love Mellow. Super awesome card. Late game card, mid game card, even an early game card sometimes. Honestly comes in clutch and really, really puts your opponent on a difficult time, and sometimes impossible, and this will save you. So definitely would recommend these for your events. For 2K counters, I'm actually not running any Kaya. I haven't been sold on it yet, because placing it just for mill 2, essentially, that can be useful, but you're placing that card. And the reason why I'm placing Alvida is there is a rare circumstance where you may need to play her down to be aggressive, and that's just for the 3K body. Never really playing it early, to be honest, but definitely playing it super duper late, and it puts your opponent in a very awkward situation if you have this, and it can sometimes just kneel in a coffin for a win or a 2K counter. And I am playing 4 Dracul Mihawk, again a 2K counter, but definitely searchable by this, by getting it off of life. Pretty simple as far as that goes. Simple dimple. We have 4 Gecko Moria. Obviously super good. You don't want to see it too early, but you want to see it around your 7 Dawn turn, and maybe even after your Mihawk play turn, or even there. So the great thing about the 3000 worlds as well, to bring this up, there's times now when you go to your 9 Dawn turn or your 10 Dawn turn, you don't want to play your Mihawk on curve. You actually might have the option to go wide with your board and continue to use Doflamingo skill, and just use one of these to get rid of a 5 cost. Because let's say they have a 5 cost or lower on the board you want to get rid of. I've used this even on like a Nami before, and it was definitely worth it to pill the board and get rid of a 1 cost. But essentially, now, like, why would you do that when this is an option instead? And then that does come up, and it did come up, and I did abuse that once. And I feel like to bring that up is a big thing. So place Gecko Moria. Again, pretty good. That leaves it with that. Next is the actual GOAT of this whole deck, and this is Kuma Pacifista Engine. For set 4, I don't know if we have any room to do this. This is actually the hardest thing, but this engine literally shuts down your opponent and honestly sets this deck apart of everything. You could even not use Doflamingo skill, but if you happen to see this engine turn after turn, essentially your opponent's put like in an impossible situation, especially if you play all at the top of the deck and you call this with your off your hand when they attack into it. They're essentially put in a really hard spot, and that's it. If you don't know, you don't know, but this is honestly the GOAT, and I would never recommend playing less than 4 and 4. I've seen a lot of people play 3, but I really would not recommend that, just because there's going to be times where you'll see, oh my gosh, why didn't I have this card? This is so frustrating. I really wish I had this. So, Kuma, Pacifista Engine, definitely great. No room for Sentomaru. Don't need a shuffle. Don't worry about Sentomaru. Next we have is actually 3 Gecko Morias. A lot of people may run, instead of this, they run that. This is my frustration part. What if you see this and you have a Kuma out, a Bartholomew Kuma, and you don't have that? That's really frustrating. So I just run 3. Obviously, the nut, if you hit this into this, very, very strong. It did come up today, and I think I've always ran this, and I'm comfortable keeping it that way. Again, 4 Treasure Cup Jinbeis. Pretty good. This deck, when Red reads this, they're like, oh, this card's not balanced. Why does this exist? And it just puts your opponent in a possible situation. I definitely had a game like this today when I played against Zoro. I had both of these out and rested. So everything has on KO ability on my KO. So again, very good card. Would recommend it. Don't get rid of it. Play 4 of it. Go buy them. Don't care what the price is, guys. Just go buy them, right? And then last but definitely not least, the Boa of Hancock's. Basically, if this card enters the field, it is a target for things like 3,000 Worlds, Jet Pistols, Fire Fists. Get that card off of the field. And the on attack draw one is extremely annoying. If you've played any deck that like has a Raizo that just draws one on attack, you would know how powerful that is. Most of the time why this card kind of sucks is because it's usually gone. And there's a way to play around using the skill, but you don't have to abuse it. Most of the time, it's a 1k counter. That's fine, right? And sometimes it can be an attacker, sometimes it can be a blocker. But the most important thing is that it's there as an option and can sometimes just run away the game if your opponent doesn't know what to do. One thing I wanted to talk about as far as starting hands goes as well, and some little key notes. Again, if you're going first, it's really good to see a Perona. If you see like a lot of good value cards and not a Perona, that is okay as long as you maybe see like a Doflamingo. If you don't see these or this, definitely Mulligan, I would believe. That would be guaranteed, right? And then something good I'd like to do here is have a Love Mellow when you're on your 5 Dawn turn. Because when you have 5 Dawn out, and let's say you use this is the GOAT here, by the way. You use Doflamingo skill on curve. You pay 1, and you call out a Boa Hancock. So you call out a Boa Hancock to the field, okay? And your hand, let's say, just has a Love Mellow, so you have 2 Dawn active here. And let's say you have, let's say, a 1k counter, another 1k counter, and a 2k counter. Okay, something like this in the Love Mellow. Well, essentially, this Love Mellow is made for life, so it depends if you want to keep it or not. And your opponent's gonna definitely invest in a swing in this, but having the Love Mellow puts them in a possible situation where they can't kill it, and sometimes you can even benefit from the draw from this, which is kind of rare sometimes, but it can happen. Usually they have to put a lot of resources to get rid of this, especially if they have a card that is rested. I have definitely discarded 3 or even 4 cards to keep this standing to attack a card that was rested, so you can then attack back. It's not worth it that much if more than 2 cards, if they're attacking really big into it, but definitely worth at least a Love Mellow. And then if you're able to benefit from the draw off the skill, that would be pretty good, especially on your 7 Dawn turn. Most of the time you'll just have the extra Dawn anyway from placing Flamingo, and then using Doflamingo skill, and you'll also have that Boa from that last Dawn. So it curves out extremely well, and I'd recommend anybody to watch my videos and see how I do that. The next thing I want to talk about is actually going second. Now, I would say against most decks, you actually just want to go first. That would be my general synopsis. However, there are times where you would maybe want to go second. That's specifically black, and some decks don't want you to go first, and that's going to happen. You're going to lose a dice roll, buddy. And essentially, you have to kind of adapt and see the best you can do, and it's not an auto loss, that's for sure. I can tell you I've won so many games going second, and sometimes it can be an advantage. And number one tip here, let's say you go to your first turn. Let's say you have even like a mediocre or a mid hand. I would first of all, if you have a Perona in your hand, that's just fine. You can keep that. If you have a Doflamingo in your hand, definitely keep this, even if you do not see a Perona. This is where it gets really good, is this Doflamingo, but it depends on the rest of your hand, right? You can make that judgment when you see that first mulligan hand. But seeing these 2 cards in your opening hand is going to be really good going second, but especially this one. So, but you don't need to see a Perona going second, because you don't need to use a skill. Essentially, when you're going second, you actually are behind on building board. Your opponent's already building board, and when you call rested cards out, you're going to be fighting for board the whole time, and it's going to be a struggle. So sometimes you want to build a board, like a card or 2 first, and then build the board and have a blocker out to defend your characters, because essentially your main goal with Doflamingo is build a board and then attack their board, win board state, and then kill them. And sometimes it can be a race of just killing them. It just kind of mostly depends on how that goes. But to give you a very strict example here, let's say you go in your first turn, you have 2 Dawn. And let's say you do have a Perona as well. Don't place this Perona unless they're going to place a card like a Bonnie that you want to attack into, that you need to attack into, because you don't want to directly attack into it with a Doflamingo on your 4 Dawn turn. That isn't great. But I would highly suggest actually waiting till your next turn right here, till turn 2, because essentially you'll take a damage, so you're more likely to see more cards like a Perona, and you'll also draw more cards, so more likely to see a Perona. And you can still do the same skill, paying 1, placing the Perona here, and then still looking at the top of the deck. And the benefit of doing that and going second is essentially you can exactly choose 3 cards. You can use Doflamingo 3 times. So to give you an example, let's say your hand is this, the top of the deck is this. It's just a raw example, right? So you'll see a Jinbei, so you can use Jinbei, draw a card, Gecko, draw a card, Jinbei. That's just a raw example, and that's just using the skill right away that turn, right? Because you're going to call this off the top, and the rest of your deck is already lined up. However, if you did it on this previous turn, where you only had 2 Dawn, and you place this, let's say this is the same top of the deck, right? Well, now you still have to draw a card, place the Jinbei, draw another card, and then place the other card, and you have 1 card left over. You don't have anything for that 8 Dawn turn. You have to then play like a blocker Doflamingo or another Perona, and that puts you in a weird state where there was no reason. You had a floating Dawn anyway, because when you use this skill, we can do swing for 8. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And sometimes it doesn't even make sense to start calling cards off the top of the deck like this, unless it has a benefit of doing something. And sometimes it can be rough not doing something. And sometimes what I might even recommend, even if you see a Perona, because you do want to build a field and beat their field, especially this is very exceptional against Zoro too. I would on my 4 Dawn, instead of playing any of these, I would play down a Jinbei. And then when I play down that Jinbei, essentially, this is my whole turn, right? But when I go down to my 6 Dawn turn, I'm planning to play this anyway. So when I go up to 6 Dawn, I can then swing with the Jinbei at, let's say, their character, and then play the Doflamingo blocker, still having 3 Dawn left over, and start using skill right away from there. And that sets up even deeper your 8 Dawn turn, or your 10 Dawn turn, and you can have those options for those Mihawks, or even better, the 3000 worlds. So it's a mix of slew of things, to be honest, right? But essentially, I would just use and really abuse your curve here, and this is kind of where the expertise comes in, guys. But as far as the end game goes, most of the time you're going to be building a board. Essentially, if you'll see most of my games, I've sometimes cheated pacifistas out off of my Kumas and put them in an unwinnable situation, having too much defense. And Mihawk is generally placing down a Mihawk is going to be a really big way to win the game. And there's a couple other things to do to win a game that's basic, that's not just Doflamingo based. But before I end the video, I did want to go over my matchups today, just to give you like a raw example of what happened. So story time now. So I actually got to buy round 1, and I'll definitely put all the graphics here right now. And with that buy, I opened a box. It was a really bad box, like pretty terrible. I think it was Alt Usopp, Alt Soja King, which pretty bad, but it's there. I needed it. And last thing was like a Katakuri. So it was pretty bad. So I go to round 2, and I'm facing a Katakuri. And he actually should have won that game, but he didn't know the play at the end there. And I would actually attribute most of that win to when he swung at me for 7k with his leader. And he swung at me for 12k with a cracker and double attack. And I took it. Like one does, and I had 5 life, went down to 3 life. I hit this, and I 3000 rolled as Sanji. I didn't kill Sanji the turn before because I wanted to play the Jinbei out. I played the Jinbei out, making it hard for him to kill it because he doesn't want a Sanji gone. That was my plan. I then 3000 worlds as Sanji, and it puts him in a hard spot where now I have to kill the Jinbei. and I can just guard out of it or whatever I want to do, right? I definitely have the options, but he used all of his Dawn on Cracker, which in retrospect, he could have probably left 1 or 2 or even 3 Dawn out and then been fine. I'm thinking, yeah, he probably could have left all 3 out. Use 1 on Cracker, 2 to use Sanji just to get the plus off of that as well. Which again would have been nuts. And essentially I was able just to build board, have a blocker out, win that one. Again, he could have won that, but it was, what do you do when I have 1 blocker and so many cards in hand, no active Dawn, 1 life? It was a weird situation. Maybe if you thought about it for a little bit longer, possibly. Game 3, I go against another Katakuri, Anthony, and my locals. And with that, it was a funny match. Essentially, I played board control, and then later he played board control, but I had a lot of life. And by the way, I won the die roll in the first game. In this game, I lost the die roll. He decided to go second, which I think Katakuri likes going second, regardless. And essentially, what happened here in this game was a slew of me playing good with my board, but I had to make a crucial decision early on. I did mulligan. I did see a really good starting hand with the Perona. I placed the Perona down on my first turn, and then the next turn I was able to get a Gecko Moria out. And with that, when he went to 4 Dawn, he thought, well, I need to get rid of this. He actually put 2 Dawn on Katakuri, swinging it for 8k, and my hand had a bunch of 1ks in it. I think 2 of them were Perona. It was kind of rough with how many 1ks I was seeing. There was no 2ks, so I actually decided, because I want to build board and deal with him later, I'm going to play 3. I used 3 of my 1k, so I was down to 2 cards in hand only, which obviously pretty rough as far as that goes. But I did know the top cards in my deck that were coming, and I was able to abuse a lot of 3,000 worlds here. He then plays this yellow Sanji character, and then passes turn. And I decide that with this, I didn't want him to swing at this, so I didn't want to attack with this yet. He's still at 4 life going right now. Okay, so then I 3,000 worlds his Sanji right away, and I believe I just swing for 6k because I definitely needed to get rid of that. So I played board control right away and left this up. So he then gave me a damage, which I just went down to 4 life, and then I think he placed a Cracker. So with that Cracker, my board state being like this, I go to my 7 Dawn turn, and I have a lot of options here. I definitely think I remember what the top card of my deck was. It is probably it was definitely a Gecko Moria, like the classic one. Classic Gecko Moria on top of the deck. To do 2 Dawn here, attach this, call this off of the top of the deck, attack with this because I don't care about that anymore. And I had another one of these because I planned to draw it. I basically saw 2 of the top of my deck. Used it right away on this Cracker, and now I use 2 of those. I built my field. My hand is now decently healthy because it gave me a life, and he's going to his 8 Dawn turn. Okay, and by the way, in this point, I'm thinking to myself, I don't have a Mihawk. I'm really afraid of him using a 7-cost Big Mom, but he has a Katakuri as well. So he decides to actually swing 5 into this. I counter out of it, and then he places the 8 cost and then places this actually in my life. So now he has his a little bit of a funny thing. Now I have 5 life at the time, right? So just to give you an example, I had 5 life at the time with that and with this board state. I then go to my next turn. On my 9 Dawn turn, I didn't see a Doflamingo, and I was able to play out this. I think I called out another. I don't remember what I called out actually right now at the top of the deck. But essentially I had some. I think I attacked with this, called out something else, and then attacked right on my 9 Dawn turn. Right, things like this. I didn't have a 9 cost in hand. I couldn't exactly deal with this Katakuri, but essentially the next turn, I think I tried to block something and I got a couple characters killed, and essentially he decided to put the Gecko Moria on the bottom of my life again. So I'm at 6 life. I announced to the shop, I'm at 6 life. Everyone's like kind of laughing. And my opponent, he had 2 categories, he's at 2 health, and he then decided, oh, he thought I just lost the game, right? I'm at 6 life, which is pretty good, but he has 2 categories and he has Big Mom chains coming. I don't have enough attacks to deal with him, even if I was just attack every turn, right? But essentially, I had already the idea. I placed a Perona. I'm gonna need this for later. This is a big deal. Before I even placed the Perona, I actually called a Kuma off the top of my deck, and then I just hard placed a Boa Hancock. I threw a Dawn on her. It didn't really matter, and then I may have had 2 Dawn active because let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I had 2 Dawn active, so I just had that going on. Honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal. Actually, no, I had 1. I just left 1 Dawn active for no reason, so I had nothing else to do with it. Wasn't doing anything. I didn't have a Love Mellow in hand, so I fainted. He ends up killing this. I obviously have a Pacifista in hand, and then I go to my next turn. He's just chaining big bombs at this point, right? And I go to my next turn, and I believe I just swing with these cards. I call out a Jinbei and Jinbei with this. I still have this coming already out here, and then I decide to play down another card because I still have another Pacifist, and I play another Kuma, and that was honestly the big breaking point. He lost the following turn. Even with like hitting a sovereignty in life, which is just fine, but essentially he killed my bow at the end of it, and I was able to counter out with a Love Mellow and call out another Pacifista, and I just killed him with this board, and it was guaranteed, and it was pretty good. And I think I ended up with like, I don't know, 2 cards in my life, these face up. So it was a race, but it was essentially, I was able to get that. And my opponent asked me after, you should have recorded that game, because honestly, how the fuck did you get out of that bullshit? Because it was fucking great. Last game I played against Zoro, I actually had to play down. So he was actually just 2-1. And he's a very nice guy, but I think his set is still OP03, so he didn't have a lot of broken things, and I just did Doflamingo things to it. I wish I could say more about it, but I guess the main concern is that he didn't know that Bartholomew Makuma was a blocker, and that obviously is a big deal when you're going for lethal, right? Knowing that Kuma is a blocker. Sorry, I'm just trying to find this Kuma. Yeah, there we go. Knowing that Kuma's a blocker, which obviously, you know, can affect a lot of things. I mean, that's a really big thing. I just wasn't blocking with it till my last attack, and it honestly worked out super well, and I was pretty happy about this setup. But thanks everybody for watching today. I appreciate your support, and I will see you all in the next video. Ciao.